Primarily I'm a writer, but I did take a detour to art school as a way of avoiding writing early in my career. And so I did take a long detour into art, which ended up bringing me back to writing in a really beautiful and fulfilling way. And so that's primarily what I focus on now. I do spend an extreme amount of time daydreaming, which serves me well, I think. And as for the nerd, I love all things fantasy, vampire, fairy, and yeah. So I'm a proud nerd. Fantasy is absolutely what I love. I've written middle grade, high fantasy. I've written short stories, that have fantastic elements or fairy tale elements that mingle with the mainstream. And Daughter of Smoke and Bone is really a combination of both. It's modern fantasy. It combines a lot of myth and legend with a real solid, real world grounding. And I love the combination. I love the idea of folklore and strange mythical things creeping into everyday life. I had been really looking forward to writing this new book when I finished my previous one. It was a science fiction young adult novel, and once I started, I quickly realized it wasn't fun. It just wasn't panning out, and it was sort of like pulling teeth. So after really forcing myself for weeks to sit down and write this book, I decided I was very demoralized, and I needed to give myself a day of just pure play and write whatever I wanted and just remember how fun writing could be. And what came of that day was the most fun day I've ever had writing, and it was a dialogue, came out of nowhere. It was a dialogue between a blue-haired teenage girl and her father, who wasn't her natural father and who wasn't human. And the dynamic was so interesting, and I love writing dialogue. I used to be terrified of it, and then I really feel that dialogue is where the life of a book is, and the characters came alive and they really came out of nowhere, and I hadn't really had that happen to that extent before, and I just had to know who these characters were, and so that was the beginning of the book. And I had a lot of questions that came up from that one day of writing, and I set about answering them. And one of them was a wishbone that the father figure wore around his neck. And that was really an important seed of the story, and my working title for a long time. And just a lot of other elements like that just were like strange little details that crept in. And then I had to figure out, really I had a lot of questions to answer for myself. And that was the fun of it, was figuring out what was the story behind these characters.